was rejected by several publishers, so Beatrix had it printed herself to give to family and friends. About this time, Frederick Warren agreed to publish the tale of the author would supply color pictures, and the book finally appeared in 1902, priced at 1 shilling or 5 pence. It was an instant success and has remained so ever since. It is a pacey story with an engaging hero, an exciting chase, and a happy ending, matched with exquisite illustrations, and the result is a children's classic whose appeal is ageless. So, let's dive in. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits, and their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a big fir tree. The little rabbits and their mother. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but don't go to Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mrs. McGregor." So we have the rabbit and all 4, the 3 in all red capes, and we have Peter Rabbit in the blue. We have Mrs. McGregor. "Now run along, and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Mrs. Rabbit, and 4. Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the wood to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. I love currant. Such a beautiful flavor. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, went down the lane to gather blackberries. The rabbits, no longer wearing maybe they were bags or cloaks, I don't know. They are no longer wearing them. We have little birds around them as they pick their blackberries. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First he ate some lettuces and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. But round the end of a cucumber frame, whom should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was on his hands and knees planting out young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling, "Stop the thief!" Peter Rabbit. We have Mr. McGregor around the cucumber frame, and Mr. McGregor chasing after Peter Rabbit. Peter was most dreadfully frightened. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way back to the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages, and the other shoe amongst the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs, went faster, so that I think he might have gotten away altogether if he had not unfortunately run into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons, quite new. We have the shoes going missing, and him caught in the gooseberry net. Poor little brass button. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears, but his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and implored him to exert himself. Mr. McGregor came up with a sieve, which he intended to pop up on the top of Peter. Peter wriggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind him, and rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not so much water in it. And the birds. Peter without his jacket jumping into the water can. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps nurse was running in and out over the stone doorstep, carrying peas and beans to feed to her family in the wood. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond where Mr. McGregor filled his water cans. A white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it were alive. Peter thought it best to go away. Without speaking to her, he had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny, which I think we also meet eventually. A beautiful illustration of Peter Rabbit with the cat in the water. They almost look like goldfish. He went back towards the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Screech, scratch, scratch, screech. Peter scurried underneath the bushes, but presently, as nothing happened, he came out and climbed up on a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back turned towards Peter, and beyond him was the gate. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along a straight walk behind some blackcurrant bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him in the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the wood outside the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes for a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds. Peter never stopped running or looked behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. Scarecrow and the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft sand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in a fortnight. I am sorry to say that Peter was not very well during the evening. His mother put him to bed and made some chamomile tea, and she gave a dose of it to Peter, 1 tablespoonful to be taken at bedtime. But Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. Which makes sense. My understanding is rabbits don't do very well when wet. The Tale of Squirrel Nutkin. It's a little squirrel there with its bushy tail. 1903. About this book. In 1901, Beatrix Potter was spending the summer with her family in Langholm, a house on the shores of Derwentwater in the Lake District. She wrote a letter all about the squirrels she saw there to an 8-year-old Nora Moore, the daughter of her former governess. An old lady who lives on the island says she thinks they come over the lake when their nuts are ripe, but I wonder how they can get across the water. Perhaps they make little rafts. The letter goes on to relate the story of Nutkin, the cheeky squirrel who is finally punished by Old Brown, an owl whom Beatrix has substituted for the old lady of her letter. The finished book was dedicated to Nora. It contains many views of the beautiful Lake Derwentwater, largely unchanged today. This is a tale about a tale that belonged to a little red squirrel, and his name was Nutkin. He had a brother called Twinkleberry, and a great many cousins. They lived in a wood at the edge of a lake. In the middle of the lake there is an island covered with trees and nut bushes, and amongst those trees stands a hollow oak tree, which is the house of an owl who is called Old Brown. We also took with them an offering of 3 fat mice as a present for Old Brown, and put them down upon his doorstep. Then Twinkleberry and the other little squirrels each made a low bow and said politely, "Old Mr. Brown, will you favor us with permission to gather nuts upon your island?" But Nutkin was excessively impertinent in his manners. He bobbed up and down like a little red cherry, singing, riddle me, toad, a little wee man in a red coat, a staff in his hand and a stone in his throat. If you tell me this riddle, I'll give you a groat. Now this riddle is as old as the hills. Mr. Brown paid no attention whatever to Nutkin. He shut his eyes obstinately and went to sleep. The squirrels filled their little sacks with nuts and sailed away home in the evening. Oh, I love this. This is such a cool illustrative style. But next morning, they all came back to Owl Island, and Twinkleberry and the others brought a fine fat mole and laid it on the stone in front of Old Brown's doorway and said, "Mr. Brown, will you favor us with your gracious permission to gather some more nuts?" But Nutkin, who had no respect, began to dance up and down, tickling old Mr. Brown with a nettle and singing, "Old Mr. B, riddle me ree, hitty-pitty within the wall, hitty-pitty without the wall, if you touch hitty-pitty will bite you." Mr. Brown woke up suddenly and carried the mole into his house. He shut the door in Nutkin's face. Presently, a little thread of blue smoke from a wood fire came up from the top of the tree, and Nutkin peeped through the keyhole and sang, "A house full, a hole full, and you cannot gather a bowl full." The squirrels searched for nuts all over the island and filled their little sacks, but Nutkin gathered oak apples, yellow and scarlet, and sat upon a beech stump, playing marbles and watching the door of old Mr. Brown. Oh, look at their little squirrel marbles, that's cute. On the third day, the squirrels got up very early and went fishing. They got 7 fat minnows as a present for Old Brown. They paddled over the lake and landed under a crooked chestnut tree on Owl Island. Twinkleberry and 6 other little squirrels each carried a fat minnow, but Nutkin, who had no nice manners, brought no present at all. He ran in front singing, "The man in the wilderness said to me, 'How many strawberries grow in the sea?' I answered him as I thought good, 'As many red herrings grow in the wood.'" But old Mr. Brown took no interest in riddles, not even when the answer was provided for him. On the 4th day, the squirrels brought a present of 6 fat beetles, which were as good as plums, in plum pudding for Old Brown. Each beetle was wrapped up carefully in a dock leaf, fastened with a pine needle pin. But Nutkin sang as rudely as ever, "Old Mr. B, riddle me ree, flower of England, fruit of Spain, met together in a shower of rain, put in a bag tied round with a string. If you'll tell me this riddle, I'll give you a ring." Which was ridiculous of Nutkin because he had not got any ring to give to Old Brown. The other squirrels hunted up and down the nut bushes, but Nutkin gathered robin's pin cushions off a briar bush and stuck them full of pine needles. On the 5th day, the squirrels brought a present of wild honey. It was so sweet and sticky that they licked their fingers as they put it down upon the stone. They had stolen it out of a bumblebee's nest on the tippity-top of the hill, but Nutkin skipped up and down, saying, "Hum-a-bum-buzz, buzz, hum-a-bum-buzz, as I went over Tippledine, I met a flock of fly swine, some yellow-necked, some yellow-backed, they were the bonniest swine that e'er went over Tippledine." Old Mr. brought a new-laid egg in a little rush basket for the last parting present of Old Brown, but Nutkin ran in front laughing and shouting, "Humpty Dumpty lies in the beck, with white counterpane round his neck. 40 doctors and 40 rights cannot put Humpty Dumpty to rights." Now Mr. Brown took an interest in eggs. He opened one eye and shut it again, but he did not speak. Nutkin became more and more impertinent. "Old Mr. B, old Mr. B, hickamore, on King's kitchen door. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't drive hickamore off the king's kitchen door." Nutkin danced up and down like a sunbeam, but still Old Brown said nothing at all. Nutkin began again. "Arthur O'Power has broken his band. He comes roaring up the land. This king of Scots, with all his power, cannot turn Arthur of the power." Nutkin made a whirring noise to sound like a wind, and he took a running jump right onto the head of Old Brown. Then all at once was a flutterment and a scufflement and a loud squeak. The other squirrels scuttered away into the bushes. When they came back very cautiously, peeping round the tree, there was Old Brown sitting on his doorstep quite still, with his eyes closed as if nothing had happened. But Nutkin's was in his waistcoat pocket. This looks like the end of the story, but it isn't. Old Brown carried Nutkin into his house and held him up by the tail, intending to skin him, but Nutkin pulled so very hard that his tail broke in two, and he dashed up the staircase and escaped out of the attic window. And to this day, if you meet Nutkin up in a tree and ask him a riddle, he will throw sticks at you and stamp his feet and scold and shout, The end. Okay then. As I've said throughout the story, I love this style of illustration. It's just so neat. And the stories are a lot of fun too so far. Let's continue let's keep going with The Tailor of Gloucester. About this book, The Tailor of Gloucester was Beatrix Potter's own favorite among all her books. She first heard the true story on which is based when visiting her cousin Caroline Hutton, who lived near Gloucester, leaving an old unfinished waistcoat for the mayor of Gloucester. In his shop one Saturday morning, a tailor was amazed to find it ready on the Monday, except for one buttonhole, for which there was no more twist. In reality, his two assistants had secretly completed the job, but Beatrix Potter has the work finished by little brown mice. She adds an extra note of enchantment by setting the story on Christmas Eve, when animals can talk, and weaving in one of their favorite traditional rhymes. The book was dedicated to another of the Moore children, this time to Frida, because you were fond of fairy tales and have been ill. In the time of swords and periwigs and full-skirted coats, with flowers and lappets, when gentlemen wore ruffles and gold-laced waistcoats of Budozoy and taffeta, there lived a tailor in Gloucester. He sat in the window of the little shop in Westgate Street, cross-legged on a table from morning till dark. All day long, while the light lasted, he sewed and snippeted, piercing out his satin and pompadour and lute-string, stuffs had strange names, and were very expensive in the days of the Tailor of Gloucester. But although he sewed fine silk for his neighbours, he himself was very, very poor. A little old man in spectacles and with a pinched face, old crooked fingers, and a suit of threadbare clothes. He cut his coats without waste according to his embroidered cloth. They were very small ends and snippets that lay out upon the table. 2 narrow breadths for naught, except waistcoats for mice, said the tailor. One bitter cold day near Christmas time, the tailor began to make a coat of cherry-colored corded silk, embroidered with pansies and roses, and a cream-colored satin waistcoat. his shop at dark, for he did not sleep there at nights. He fastened the window and locked the door and took away the key. No one lived there at night, but little brown mice, and they run in and out without any keys, for behind the wooden wainscots of all the houses in Gloucester there are little mouse staircases and little secret trapdoors, and the mice run from house to house. Through those long, narrow passages they can run all over the town without going into the streets. But the tailor came out of his shop and shuffled home through the snow. He lived quite near by in College Court, next the doorway to College Green, and although it was not a big house, the tailor made so poor that he only rented the kitchen. He lived alone with his cat. It was called Simpkin. Now all day long while the tailor was out at work, Simpkin kept house by himself, and although he was fond of mice, though he gave them no satin for coats, meow, said the cat when the tailor opened the door. Meow. The tailor replied, Simpkin, we shall make our fortune, but I am worn to a ravelling. Take this groat, which is our last fourpence, and Simpkin, take a china pipkin, buy a pen'orth of bread, a pen'orth of milk, a pen'orth of sausages. And oh, Simpkin, with the last penny of our fourpence, buy me 1 pen'orth of cherry-coloured silk, but do not lose the last penny of the fourpence, Simpkin, or I am undone and worn to a thread paper, for I have no more twist. Simpkin again said meow, and took the groat and the pipkin and went out into the dark. The tailor was very tired and beginning to be ill. He sat down by the hearth and talked to himself about that wonderful coat. I shall make my fortune to be cut bias. The mayor of Gloucester is to be married on Christmas Day in the morning, and he hath ordered a coat and an embroidered waistcoat to be lined with yellow taffeta, and the taffeta sufficient, and there is no more left over in snippets that will serve to make divots for mice. Then the tailor started, for suddenly interrupting him from the dresser on the other side of the kitchen came a number of noises. Tip-tap, 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 tip. Now what can that be? The tailor of Gloucester jumping up from his chair. The dresser was covered with crockery and pipkins, willow-patterned plates and teacups and mugs. The tailor crossed the kitchen and stood quite still beside the dresser, listening and peering through his spectacles. Again, from under a teacup came those funny little noises, tip-tap, 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 tip. "'Tis very peculiar," said the tailor of Gloucester. He lifted up his teacup, which was upside down. Out stepped a little live lady mouse, and made a curtsy to the tailor. Then she hopped away down the dresser, off the dresser and under the wainscot. The tailor sat down by the fire, warming his poor cold hands and mumbling to himself. The waistcoat is cut out from the peach-coloured satin. The tambour was stitched and rosebuds and beautiful floss silk. Was I wise to entrust my last fourpence to Simpkin? 1 and 20 buttonholes of cherry-coloured twist. But all at once viciously at the teacups. He wanted his supper of little fat mouse. Simpkin, said the tailor, where is my twist? But Simpkin hid a little parcel privately in the teapot and spit and growled at the tailor. If Simpkin had been able to talk, he would have asked, where is my mouse? Alack, I am undone, said the tailor of Gloucester, and he went sadly to bed. All that night long Simpkin hunted and searched through the kitchen, peeping into cupboards and under the wainscot and into the teapot where he had hidden that twist, but still he found never a mouse. Whenever the tailor muttered and talked in his sleep, Simpkin said meow and made strange horrid noises as cats do at night. But the poor old tailor was very ill with fever, tossing and turning in his four-post bed. Still, in his dreams he mumbled, no more twist, no more twist. All that day he was ill, and the next day and the next, and what should become of the cherry-colored coat in the tailor's shop in Westgate Street, the embroidered silk and satin lay cut upon the table, 1 and 20 buttonholes, and who should come to sew them when the window was barred and the door was fast locked? But that does not hinder the little brown mice. They run in and out without any keys, through all the old houses in Gloucester. Out of doors, and the market folks went trudging through the snow to buy their geese and turkeys to bake their Christmas pies, but there would be no Christmas dinner for Simpkin and the poor old tailor of Gloucester. The tailor lay ill for 3 days and nights, and then, when it was Christmas Eve, and very late at night, the moon climbed up over the roofs and chimneys, and looked out over the gateways into College Court. There were no lights in the windows, nor any sound in the houses. All the city of Gloucester was fast asleep under the snow. And still Simpkin wanted his mice. He mewed as he stood beside the four-post of bed. But it is in the old story that all the beasts can talk in the night between Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in the morning, though there are very few folk that can hear them, or know what it is they say. When that cathedral clock struck 12, there was an answer, like an echo of the chimes, and Simpkin heard it, and came out to the tailor's door and wandered about in the snow. From all the roofs and gables and old wooden houses in Gloucester came 1,000 merry voices singing the old Christmas rhymes, all the old songs that I ever heard of, and some I don't know, like Whittington's bells. First and loudest the cocks cried out, Dame, get up and bake your pies. Oh, dilly, 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 sighed Simpkin. And now in a garret there were lights and sounds of dancing, and cats came from over the way. Hey, diddle, diddle, the cat and the fiddle, all the cats in Gloucester, except me, said Simpkin. Under the wooden eaves, the starlings and sparrows sang of Christmas pies. The jackdaws woke up the cathedral tower. And although it was the middle of the night, the throstles and the robins sang, the air quite full of little twittering tunes. But it was all rather provoking to poor hungry Simpkin. Particularly he was vexed with some little shrill voices from behind a wooden lattice. I think that they were bats, because they always have very small voices, especially in a black frost when they talk in their sleep, like the tailor of Gloucester. They said something mysterious that sounded like, Buzz quoth the blue fly, hum quoth the bee, buzz and hum they cry, and so do we. And Simpkin went away, shaking his ears as if he had a bee in his bonnet. From the tailor's shop in Westgate came a glow of light, and when Simpkin crept up to peep in the window, it was full of candles. There was a snibbiting of scissors and a snabbiting of thread, and little mouse voices sang loud and gaily. 4 and 20 sailors went to catch a snail, the best men among him durst not judge her tale. She put out her horns like a little kylo cow. Run, tailors, run, or she'll have you all eaten now. Then without a pause, the little mouse voices went on again. See if my lady's oatmeal, cry my lady's flour, put it in a chestnut and let it stand an hour. Mew, mew, interrupted Simpkin, and he scratched at the door. But the key was under the tailor's pillow. He could not get in. The little mice only laughed and tried another shutters and shut out Simpkin. But still, through the nicks and the shutters, you could hear the click of thimbles and little mouse voices singing, "No more twist, no more twist." Simpkin came away from the shop and went home, considering in his mind. He found the poor old tailor without fever sleeping peacefully. Then Simpkin went on tiptoe and took a little parcel of silk out of the teapot and looked at it in the moonlight. He felt quite ashamed of his badness compared with those good little mice. When the tailor awoke in the morning, the first thing he saw upon the patchwork quilt was a skein of cherry-colored twisted silk. Beside his bed stood the repentant Simpkin. "Alack, I am worn to a ravelling," said the tailor of Gloucester, "but I have my twist." The sun was shining on the snow when the tailor got up and dressed. He came out into the street with Simpkin running before him. The starlings whistled on the chimney stacks and the throstles and the robins sang, but they sang their own little noises, not the words they had sung in the night. "Alack," said the tailor, "I might have my twist, but no more strength nor time. It will serve to make me one single buttonhole, for this is Christmas Day in the morning. The Mayor of Gloucester shall be married by noon, and where is his cherry-colored coat?" He unlocked the door of the little shop on Westgate Street, and Simpkin ran in like a cat that expects something. But there was no one there, not even one little brown mouse. The boards were swept and clean, the little ends of thread and the little silk snivets all tidied away and gone from off the floor. But upon the table, oh joy, the tailor gave a shout. There where he had left the plain cuttings of silk, there lay the most beautifulest coat, an embroidered satin waistcoat ever were worn by a mayor of Gloucester. There were roses and pansies upon the facings of the coat, and the waistcoat was worked with poppies and cornflowers. Everything was finished except just one single cherry-colored buttonhole, and where that buttonhole was wanting, there was pinned a scrap of paper with these words in teeny-weeny writing: "No more twist." I love this view of the street and the little view of the cat, the tailor, the waistcoat. And from then began the luck of the tailor of Gloucester. He grew quite stout, and he grew quite rich. He made all the most wonderful waistcoats for all of the rich merchants of Gloucester, and for all the fine gentlemen of the country round. Never were seen such ruffles, or such embroidered cuffs, or lappets, but his buttonholes were the greatest triumph of all. The stitches of those buttonholes were so neat, so neat. I wonder how they could be stitched by an old man in spectacles, with crooked old fingers and a tailor's thimble. The stitches of those buttonholes were so small, they looked as if they had been made by mice. The end. And then we've got one more story for today. The Tale of Benjamin Bunny, 1904. Let's see what Benjamin Bunny has to get up to. The real-life Benjamin Bunny was a tame rabbit of Beatrix Potter's, whom she sketched constantly and whose exploits continually amused her. He is an abject coward, but he believes in bluster, who'd stare an old dog out of a countenance, chase a cat that has turned tail. Although Benjamin had died by 1904 when this story was published, Beatrix may well have been thinking of him when she created Peter Rabbit's cousin Benjamin. Little Benjamin is a very self-possessed animal, who makes himself quite at home in Mr. McGregor's garden. Beatrix sketched background scenes for the tale while on holiday at Fall Park, a house with a beautiful garden in the Lake District. The book is dedicated to the children of Sorry from old Mr. Bunny. Beatrix was later to settle in the Lake District village of Sorry, buying a small farm there in 1905. One morning, a little rabbit sat on a bank. He pricked his ears and listened to the tread-trot of a pony. A gig was coming along down the road. It was driven by Mr. McGregor, and beside him sat Mrs. McGregor in their best bonnet. As soon as they had passed, little Benjamin Bunny slid down into the road and set off with a hop, skip, and a jump to call upon his relations who lived in the wood at the back of Mr. McGregor's garden. I love that he has a little brown coat like this. It's so cute. she earned her living by knitting rabbit wool mittens and muffatees. Once bought a pear at a bazaar. She also sold herbs and rosemary tea and rabbit tobacco, which is what we call lavender. Little Benjamin did not very much want to see his aunt. He came around the back of the fir tree and nearly tumbled the top of his cousin Peter. Peter was sitting by himself. He looked poorly and was dressed in a red cotton pocket handkerchief. "Peter," said little Benjamin in a whisper, "who has got your clothes?" Peter replied, "The scarecrow in Mr. McGregor's garden," and described how he had been chased about the garden and had dropped his little shoes and coat. Little Benjamin sat down beside his cousin and assured him that Mr. McGregor had gone out in a gig, and Mrs. McGregor also, and certainly for the day, because she was wearing her best bonnet. Peter said he hoped it would rain. At this point, old Mrs. Rabbit's voice was heard inside the rabbit hole, calling, "Cottontail, Cottontail, fetch some more chamomile." Peter said he thought he might feel better if he went for a walk. They went away, hand in hand, and got up on the flat top of the wall at the bottom of the wood. From here they looked down into Mr. McGregor's garden. Peter's coat and shoes were plainly to be seen upon the scarecrow, topped with an old tam-o'-shanter of Mr. McGregor's. Little Benjamin said, "It spoils people's clothes to squeeze under a gate. The proper way to get in is to climb down a pear tree." Peter fell down head first, but it was of no consequence, as the bed below was newly raked and quite soft. It had been sown with lettuces. They left a great many odd little footmarks all over the bed, especially little Benjamin, who was wearing clogs. Little Benjamin said that is the first thing to be done was to get back Peter's clothes, in order that they might be able to use the pocket handkerchief. They took them off the scarecrow. There had been rain during the night, and there was water in the shoes, and the coat was somewhat shrunk. Benjamin tried on the tam-o'-shanter, but it was too big for him. That's what that is. Love it. Then he suggested that they should fill the pocket handkerchief with onions as a little present for his aunt. Peter did not seem to be enjoying himself as he kept hearing noises. Benjamin, on the contrary, was perfectly at home and ate a lettuce leaf. He said that he was in the habit of coming into the garden with his father to get lettuces for their Sunday dinner. The name of little Benjamin's papa was old Mr. Benjamin Bunny. The lettuces were very fine. Peter did not eat anything. He said that he should like to go home. Presently, he dropped half the onions. Little Benjamin said it was not possible to get back up the pear tree with a load of vegetables. He led the way boldly towards the other end of the garden. They went along a little walk on planks under a sunny red brick wall. The mice sat on their doorsteps, cracking cherry stones. They winked at Mr. Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin Bunny. Little mice, little rabbits, little planks. Oh, so cute. Presently, Peter let the pocket handkerchief go again. They got amongst the flower pots and frames and tubs. Peter heard noises worse than ever. His eyes were as big as lollipops. He was a step or two in front of his cousin when he suddenly stopped. So, the little bird there too. It's fun. This is what those little rabbits saw round the corner. We got the little illustration of the cat. That's lovely. Little Benjamin took one look, and then in half a minute less than no time, he hid himself and Peter under the onions underneath a large basket. The cat got up and stretched herself and came and sniffed the basket. Perhaps she liked the smell of onions. Anyway, she sat down upon the top of the basket. She sat there for 5 hours. I cannot draw you a picture of Peter and Benjamin underneath the basket because it was quite dark, and because the smell of onions was fearful and made Peter Rabbit and little Benjamin cry. The sun got round behind the wood, and it was quite late in the afternoon, but still the cat sat cat into the greenhouse, he locked the door. Then he came back to the basket and took out his son Benjamin by the ears and whipped him with the little switch. Then he took out his nephew Peter. Then he took the handkerchief of onions and marched out of the garden. When Mr. McGregor returned about half an hour later, he observed several things which perplexed him. It looked as though some person had been walking all over the garden in a pair of clogs, only the footmarks were too ridiculously little. Also, he could not understand how the cat could have managed to shut herself up inside the greenhouse, locking the door upon the outside. When Peter got home, his mother forgave him, because she was so glad to see that he had found his shoes and coat. Cottontail and Peter folded up the pocket handkerchief, and old Mrs. Rabbit strung up the onions and hung them from the kitchen ceiling, with the bunches of herbs and rabbit tobacco. The end. Oh, okay, that's fun. I think that was a wonderful way to round off today's bunch of Beatrix Potter stories. Let me know if you want more of these, or want me to read a particular one. Apparently, this is all of them. Also, a fun little thing is these little radishes are a different material, or a different feel to them from the background, so it's kind of textured. Got one more thing. This is the front cover. And the back cover is just the same. A little inverted version of this cover. I hope that you enjoyed this video. And as always, I wish you